All the while I was leading my family down the garden path because my family thought, law. I said, no, don't say law. It's law in IIT Kharagpur. It helps you. So, people assume that I'm politically vocal now. They should have seen me in college. I was extremely vocal. For an engineering campus, I was extremely vocal. And I used to get into all sorts of trouble, even physical troubles for that particular matter. I said, no, if it is from law from IIT Kharagpur, then think of a different level. Okay. So I sold those dreams, and when there is too much of information, that's precisely when the problems start, which is you really don't know what to make of the sources, the unspoken, unwritten agendas behind those sources. Unfortunately or fortunately, almost every controversy today in the national discourse revolves around the temple in one way or the other. And emotion like temper is best used when you know exactly how to release it and strategically employ it.
Mr. J SAI Deepak is an engineer turned litigator. After graduating in mechanical engineering, he went on to pursue LLB in IIT Kharagpur. Presently, an independent practitioner before Supreme Court and the Delhi High Court, he has carved a niche for himself in the areas of civil commercial litigation, intellectual property, and the constitutional laws. He has been associated with several landmark judgments of the Supreme Court. Mr. J SAI Deepak is an avid writer and has articles to his credit in reputed internationals journals such as Max Planck Institute. He frequently appears in panel discussions on the Constitution. Recently, he along with his several eminent fellows have set up Indic Collective Trust, stand for Indic civilizational values through legal intervention.
The first question was, why you changed your profession? You weren't happy as an engineer? Both of you.
It was interesting. I was just walking down the ramp. I could be wrong, but I heard two people say, hit him. That was interesting. I'm happy that I bring out that kind of passion. At least I bring out some interest in taking part in action as opposed to being armchair critics. Good. So, as far as I'm concerned, a good number of people end up saying that, in fact, there's a running bet, whether I'm from Andhra or Tamil Nadu or Kerala, I don't know what is going on. I'm a Tamilian from Hyderabad for all practical purposes, who loves Telugu more than he loves Tamil, and who understands the script, and who can read and write in Telugu, and certainly cannot read and write in Tamil. That's a fact. Okay, there I've said it. Whoever is actually running this bet, I think I deserve at least 20% of the cut. Okay. Now coming to the question of why did I take up law. In fact, I should answer the question of why did I take up engineering in the first place. So. I think that was more, I don't think there was a question of any family pressure or anything, but if you come from a low middle class family, there are very few options on the table, and the first thing that you're looking at is the return on investment the moment you take up a certain profession. Beyond that, you're not looking at anything else. So that was the first thing that was actually driving my career choices at that stage, and not that there was any family pressure to go in a certain direction, but the exposure was not too much, and therefore the conventional options and the go-to options were either engineering, medicine, and if you fail to do that, then take up chartered accountancy. If you don't get that, then you end up taking journalism. वो भी नहीं हुआ तो कुछ और कर लो. And the worst part is getting into an arts degree. So, especially if you come from a Tambram family, that's effectively, even without wearing the black coat, you'd have been the black sheep. So that would be the end of the matter. I think your ratings on the matrimonial chart would have been down, and comparisons with cousins on a daily basis would have started, and you'd be the soft target that everybody says. Iske tarah mat banna would be the first comparison. So I think some of those options effectively led me in the direction of engineering. I never assumed that I would actually get into engineering because I wasn't sure what I wanted at all in the first place. I just wanted to be in a profession that allowed me to, express myself in some way, as cliched as it sounds. And for an introvert, having chosen law, even I don't know how that happened. So around, I think, the 5th or 6th semester of engineering, by which time the placements were done, my placement was done, I was interested in taking up a master's in aeronautical engineering, rather aerospace, there being a distinction between the two. I was just thinking, is this really what I wanted to do? I just wasn't sure. And most importantly, people assume that I'm politically vocal now. They should have seen me in college. I was extremely vocal. For an engineering campus, I was extremely vocal. And I used to get into all sorts of trouble, even physical troubles for that particular matter. So hit him, I've faced it, I've seen that, I've been there, I've done that, okay? So as far as I was concerned, I just wanted to make at least some kind of a contribution, even if it's a squirrel's contribution to what I believed in and what I continue to believe in, what I believe I will continue to believe in for the rest of my life, and I will never compromise on that. So I wasn't sure of what is the route to adopt to contribute to what I believed in terms of the vision that I think this country must have. With all those grandiose visions, like any other engineer, the only two options, in fact, the primary option is civil services. You start thinking of civil services. But with a mouth like this, you can't get into civil services, okay? Because it's not about cracking the exam, but it's about surviving the system. And you'll have to be a yes man for the better part of your life. And for the most part, your tongue will be the color of the shade of somebody else's boot polish. So for all practical purposes, that's how it would be. So I wasn't sure of it. This is not to denigrate that cadre at all. I've seen such brilliant bureaucrats in the course of my profession. My respect for them only goes up when I realize how they survived despite the system, not because of the system. So that's when I started thinking of certain other options. And at that stage is when I had come for a paper presentation at the Industrial Engineering Department of IIT Kharagpur. The tech fest was called Optima. So there, the then, I think, director of IIT Kharagpur, Mr. Shishir Dubey, a good and close friend of Sri Murli Manohar Joshi, he was talking about a potential program that could start in 2006. So that was law with an integration, with a specialization in intellectual property rights. So I started thinking about it, I started reading about it. And of course, not that I have a fascination for intellectual property rights, although I have an aptitude for it. Law was ultimately what I wanted to get into. And let's concede, most engineers, at least in India, are suckers for the IIT brand. So I said, IIT Kharagpur mein law, that's interesting. So I said, okay, why not give it a shot? I started thinking more about it, and I realized that perhaps that's the way. All the while I was leading my family down the garden path, because my family thought, law. I said, no, don't say law, it's law in IIT Kharagpur, it helps you. So, because the moment you say law, they assumed, baapre. So in Hyderabad, there is a bridge called Chikatpalli Bridge. Okay. So that bridge is associated with a lot of touts and louts, especially lawyers riding Hercules cycle wearing two unmatched pair of slippers. So they thought, ye karega tu? I said, no, if it is from law from IIT Kharagpur, then think of a different level. Okay. So I sold those dreams, and they didn't realize that ultimately I wanted to get into litigation. I kept stringing them along. But most importantly, to answer the question, I wanted to contribute to the public discourse in some way. And for me, there is no point in having an opinion without actually having the training. So the idea was to understand the system better. And understanding the legal architecture gives you a ringside view of how the system works and who are the dramatis personae. And that's the reason that I chose. And I've always been interested in litigation. Someday I wanted to be in constitutional litigation, but in the first few years, constitutional litigation doesn't pay. So I paid my dues by starting my ropes in the profession as a civil commercial litigator. And over the last 7 years, I did that. First 7 years I did that, and subsequently I decided to switch as much as possible to constitutional law. So the true potential of this profession, the Vishwaroop of this profession, and what it can actually present by way of options, the kind of windows, doors, and avenues and vistas it opens up, is something that I was truly fascinated by. And that's the reason I made the choice. And I can confidently say I didn't do that because I was a failed engineer. I think I was a decent engineer, if not a great engineer.
So, moving on to the next question, which is very related to what the both of you said. This was asked by Manisha and Rudraksh, and this is also directed to the both of you, that if one has to, if one currently goes for a job and then there is this source of income that is coming from the job, then when we decide that we have to work for the society by, let's say, contributing to the public discourse or contributing to the society using public policy, then how do we change our professions? We face the consequence of kicking our source of income. Then how do we go about that?
Frankly, I don't know how to give a general answer to that question, because that depends on the transition to the profession that you wish to make the switch to. So that perhaps is, that varies from profession to profession. I can only speak of my profession. The one thing that perhaps I think is very common to my generation, and perhaps even more common to the next generation, is that the basic or the standard default degree has become the engineering degree. So clearly there are too many engineers out there. And I'm not sure that the supply is the same as the demand, or rather the demand is the same as the supply. And two, there is a clear dearth of, as he rightly said, quality options in other sectors. Three, thanks to what has happened since 91, 92, the purchasing power has increased, and therefore the ability of people to think beyond the conventional choices has increased, and therefore you're trying to cater to multiple tastes and choices. That opens up quite a few options as far as career options are concerned. So that is one. But most importantly, in my own profession, I typically say, and I could be wrong, is that litigation, so law is not a monolithic profession. There are multiple models, but litigation in particular is like acting and politics to a significant extent. So the first few days you sleep on the bench in Bandra, hoping to have a house in Bandra someday. And during that phase of struggle, you take every possible, I can't use the unparliamentary word, that comes your way, and you put up with everything. And to a significant extent, you're putting your hope in hard work and the unknown. Because the options and the opportunities that come your way, frankly, is a consequence of somebody's belief in you, or somebody takes a liking for you, or that you just happen to be at the right moment at the right time and the right place. So destiny, luck plays a huge role. But what certainly makes a difference, and here I would quote Mr. Ramjit Kulani, is the amount of effort that you put in is significantly proportionate in most circumstances to the opportunities that you create for yourself. So after a point, literally speaking, sky's the limit in the profession, provided you have what it takes to survive the profession, not in terms of acumen or brains, because that's only about 50% of the equation. The rest of the 50% is patience. The rest of the 50% is stamina, mental stamina, to be able to put up what the profession throws at you. And the rigors of the profession are extreme. So a 13-hour working schedule is something that you have to take for granted, assuming that you want to do well in the profession. You just want to be run-of-the-mill lawyer, do what you want, that's a different issue. But you really want to make, or let's say carve a niche for yourself, you're looking at nothing less than a 16 to 17-hour work schedule, and that's not the exception, that's the norm. That's the default standard working model. And weekends in personal life, effectively, you can say goodbye. So you do Sashtang Namaskar to this Devi called Saraswati, and you say, please bless me, give me all that you can. And you keep reading and reading and reading and reading, and that becomes your, effectively, your way of life. You won't realize it where you are in the profession. Others will point out. You'll never know where you are. Others will come and tell you, dude, you're doing okay, don't worry. So what I have realized is nobody else can convince you about the switch. It makes very little sense for anybody to give you a pep talk or a motivational speech. I don't think it works that way at all. You have to be convinced. And if you cannot find the guts or the spine in you to actually make that switch or that jump, there is very little contribution that can come from anybody else. I think there's this famous line from this movie called Chariots of Fire. Man can't put in what God is not. So you can have the talent, there's no doubting it. But what ultimately it calls for is spine. What separates the person who sets up the startup from a person who takes up a salaried profession is less about brains and more about the guts. So that is something that you have to evaluate for yourself.
So many of us here are not aware of legal aspects or the policy aspect of the things going around. Many of us don't read newspaper or are not aware of the facts. Facts goes missing when there are a lot of other thing that is floating around. So how do we know the legal issues and policy issues when day in and day out?
So whoever asked that question, in fact, I'm very happy that the question has actually been asked, because that shows it's a thinking mind, and which is trying to actually make sense of all the chaos around. Two, I also think that my sympathies are entirely with that person, because as Shobit says, I agree partly, but I think the point of departure is slightly different, which is when there is too much of information, that's precisely when the problems start, which is you really don't know what to make of the sources, the unspoken, unwritten agendas behind those sources. See, assume for a moment that the world is divided in two camps. Let's assume for a moment that's the case, which it is not, but assume that's the case. People who are confidently part of each of those camps can wallow in those echo chambers. I'm from left, you're from right, job done, ho gaya kaam. So you say that the other fellow is fake news, and this mudslinging goes on for eternity, for all time to come, till the cows come home. But people who are sitting on the fence, and those people are actually trying to make sense of what on earth is this? Do I necessarily have to fall within one of these baskets in order for me to take the right decision? And if I do so, am I going to alienate the rest of the audience? That peer pressure, that acceptance, I think that's where a significant problem comes from. So what do? Unfortunately, this problem is only going to increase even more because there are going to be more portals. I don't think it's necessarily a problem. The question is, how do you deal with that particular piece of information? And if you have a certain mooring, if you have a certain grounding in a certain, let's say, thought process, or in a certain way of looking at things, in a certain worldview, then it's easier for you to filter stuff out. But that if that's not the case, every consumer of information today, whether he likes it or not, whether he's trained in it or not, or whether she is trained in it or not, is necessarily a lawyer by training, because you have to apply your judgment, you have to apply your sense of discrimination and try and go beyond that. And which is precisely why I think the newspaper is effectively out of sync with what's happening. What you read in the newspaper for all practical purposes is completely out of sync with what's going on, especially with the news cycle, with the rapidity with which things change. And previously establishments or newspapers or media houses which were believed to be the go-to media houses for, let's say, preparation for civil services or CAT or whatever it may be. Unfortunately, those media houses have turned out to be, let's say, establishments with a certain agenda. I'm actually saying there's no problem with having an agenda. Be clear, sure, no problems at all. But just don't have this facade of neutrality, okay, because that's what creates all the trouble. Okay. Clearly identify which section or what you come from, or which camp you come from, or at least say I don't come from that particular camp, and then state your views. This facade of neutrality coupled with pushing the agenda silently, I think that is what creates a lot of trouble, because your mind is fixated on the respect for the certain brand which your father has respected, which your grandfather has respected, whereas the information that you're consuming is practically not worth the paper it is printed on. Okay, so that is a struggle which is going to continue for some time. I really don't know what the solution is, because even people who claim to be well-read and well-informed are victims of fake news more often than not, at least once a day. Okay, and WhatsApp University is of course a 24/7 university and free of charge, so that creates more trouble, right? But if let's assume for a moment you decide to say WhatsApp University is stupid, it's dumb and all that, but it's only a medium, it's not even a publication house. It is only an intermediary for all practical purposes for pushing a certain piece of information. Where does that information originate from? What is the source? What is the agenda of that particular source is effectively the question. Okay. 3, I think the problem is anybody who has an agenda is necessarily someone who has to be painted in an evil light. That's become more or less the position today. I don't see what's the point. If you don't have an opinion and you're rootless and you're without information and you don't have an opinion on anything under the sun, why do you wish to cast the same abysmal standards on others? People who have an opinion, let them have an opinion and let them at least justify those opinions. So passing off ignorance as enlightenment and passing off ignorance as a virtue, I don't think should be the name of the game, especially in this day and age of internet and explosion of information. And the other reaction could be that you say, I just can't make sense of this bloody noise, pardon the French. You turn your eyes completely away from it, you shut yourself down. That ostrich mentality, I think, is the worst possible response or reaction to such a situation. Because then you're completely unequipped to deal with issues, and frankly there is practically no issue today that does not affect any individual at a personal level. If there is a rally outside your home, or if there is a protest outside your home, or in your campus or wherever it is, clearly each of these national issues have a direct bearing on your life. So you might as well take a position about it, because if you want to shut someone up, you need to know what you're talking about. You have no other option but to deal with this chaos and make sense of it. That's the only simplistic answer that perhaps I can offer.
So you have been actively involved in Free Our Temple movement. So can you just enlighten our audience what is actually this movement? What about some aspects of it? Because many of us are unaware of it.
Uh, Unfortunately or fortunately, almost every controversy today in the national discourse revolves around the temple in one way or the other. Therefore, it is imperative to understand the nature of this particular institution, be it our own understanding of what is the caste system, be it our own understanding of what is the nature of that particular institution, whether it is a place of worship or a place of prayer. Therefore, what are the rules to be observed? 3, who are the stakeholders to that particular institution who can sit and comment and ask for reform? Okay. If you don't believe in something and you're not party to it, can you necessarily ask for reform without even understanding what that institution is about, without having the necessary training for it? Because it's okay for you to sit and pass this armchair comment that no, all religion is just about social control. I think that's as unlettered and illiterate and ignorant as it can get. 4, I think what is even more important is, today this particular institution has merely become an institution of ornamentation. The role that it played previously was, apart from being a knowledge center, it was also a merchant guild. It also provided livelihoods to so many people. So I think that is what my involvement in this particular so-called movement stems from. I must clarify, my involvement is not in the nature of an activist, because I think activists tend to be attached to their positions to such an extent that when you present them with contrary facts and when you ask them for an open debate, they label you with a certain, let's say, label by calling you a fascist or whatever it is, but beyond that they have nothing else to offer. So I would prefer not to see myself in the mold of an activist. I believe in that particular cause, but I'm approaching it largely from the standpoint of the skill sets that I've acquired over the last 10 years as a lawyer. Which is to say, if the state truly believes in the concept of secularism, shouldn't the state maintain at least an arm's length distance from all places of worship, including in matters of administration? In which case, why does it single out one particular institution for the purposes of control? And why can't it maintain the same degree of respect and distance from Hindu religious institutions as it does from other institutions? This is not an inquiry which targets other institutions of other faiths. It specifically says, at the very least, treat me at par with others and maintain this distance, because the state's entrenchment in temples is single-handedly responsible for the degradation and the devastation of the temple ecosystem and all communities associated with it. Most importantly, the more you read about this particular literature, our shallow, superficial understanding of temples and the communities associated with it, it gets exposed so thoroughly that, let me use this uncomfortable phrase, that this Brahmin domination of temples is such a myth that the more you read it, you'll be surprised. My family has any number of people whose Kuladevatas or family deities are so-called temples which are not controlled by Brahmins, and the priest is not a Brahmin, and a Brahmin cannot enter the sanctum sanctorum, the inner garbhagriha of the temple. That's the degree of respect that you're expected to observe, abide by, and follow. So the more you read about this institution, the history and the journey of this particular civilization will start appearing in front of your eyes. Nobody can ever say that every institution is perfect and flawless. That is a claim that our religion certainly does not make, or my religion does not make. It actually says that treat everything as fallible, but at least do so with responsibility and approach it with some argument and fact. That's the basic point. So my involvement has been to highlight this particular issue. In fact, while I was aware of it, I was not actively party to it. In 2015, a senior advocate of the Supreme Court, Mr. C.S. Vaidyanathan, who represented Ramlalla in Ayodhya judgment, he was kind enough to ask me to start taking an interest in these matters. So since he gave me that opportunity, I started reading more about it, and the more I read about it, I was astounded that such an issue, which has a bearing on so many people in so many communities, is effectively the subject of elitist discussions and uninformed discussions. So I wanted to contribute to that, and there was already a pending petition to the Supreme Court. Just a few weeks ago, we filed another batch of petitions challenging the HRC legislations of a lot of southern states, basically saying the state's role to facilitate social justice in the temple is perfectly acceptable. Previously, there was a situation, a terrible situation, where a vast section of community was not allowed inside the temple. And therefore, the state's role to ensure that such a situation does not return is 100% justified, and nobody can run away from that. It would be incorrect to run away from that aspect of history. But beyond that, citing that as an excuse, if you are swindling funds of the community and using funds of a religious institution for a secular purpose without the consent of that particular community, you're way out of line as far as any definition, any principle, any canon of secularism is concerned, and that is no more acceptable. That's the principled legal position, constitutional position that we have taken. Let's see what happens.
So one thing we can go for as a student is rigorous reading and research. So we are running out of time. This is the last question. And this is addressed to both of you. Anonymously someone asked, I don't know why he or she has not given his name. So the question is regarding emotions. Like we are so emotional about some issues or nation building that we jump to some conclusion or something. So what do you think is the role of emotions in your, what has been the role of emotion in your journey, and how can we direct it towards a larger cause or nation building or some societal cause? Both of you can answer this.
Definitely, I think emotion has a very, very strong role. Most of our life decisions are emotional. We may later on wrap it around some intellectual clarity, but emotion is a very, very strong force. The entire tradition of in India about bhakti has been an emotional. If you are strong emotionally, you can even reach God, is what has been said, right? But I mean, that said, are we? I mean, using emotion as a strong driver is very important, especially in this space. I mean, that will keep you going. At least personally, in my life, having some life experiences which moves you very strongly, and that will help you take a decision, and later on the other things will naturally happen, but emotion will keep you steady on that space. Somehow this being emotional has been seen as a sissy thing, right? I mean, are itna emotional ladka hai, right? This is not true. I mean, people who have strong emotions genuinely last longer, and they have at least the honesty that I feel, I mean, if you can express, and we are not expressing any emotion strong enough, right? If you are angry, as I was saying, be angry, right? You express it completely. If you are sad about something, we are always trying to play this middle path and suppressing ourselves. So has there been an incident in your life which has moved you so strongly, right? Has moved you. For example, if I saw my grandfather's death, right, it should be like, what is the purpose of life? Was such a strong thing for me, right? What is happening here? Are we also going to be that way? Who is going to be around me? What have I achieved and what I have done? So any instance in your life can move you very strongly emotionally and can change your life decisions. So I think having strong emotions is not wrong, and then try to inculcate that. Somehow we have become half human by, I mean, making it a inferior kind of an expression of ourselves. So, but the biggest things in this world have happened with people who have expressed themselves emotionally very strongly, right? Especially in the public space. Especially in the public space, people who are driven emotionally very strongly, you will see their influence on people. It's very, very strong. So, but for that you have to develop yourself to be able to hold it. How long can you be, if you have a particular emotion, how long do you have it? Right? You will very soon, it will burn you and you will do something else. But can you hold it so strong for so long? If something has made you sad, how long can you feel that, right? And that will change the way you live. So I think emotion definitely plays a very strong role, especially in a space which is dealing with people, because nothing moves like emotion. If you give a very intellectually rigorous argument, it will not change the audience as much. I have seen it myself. But if you give it an emotional argument, it changes people. So that is very important. I mean, but that shows how much you can hold it within yourself. That is the sadhana. If you can hold it strong enough, then you can change people, yeah, at a huge scale. Yeah.
If it's okay with you, can I just respond to the previous question as well? I won't take more than 30 seconds on that. Frankly, I think the one thing that everybody should do is just travel this great land, despite its flaws, despite its problems and its challenges. Just travel this once. Just go around this country. So, for the first time over the last few weeks, for the last 2 weeks, in fact 2 weeks, I was traveling deep, deep south. I was so amazed at the quality of people that I met, and especially Delhi being a war zone for all practical purposes. I was astounded at the simplicity, humility, honesty of people. It's not without reason that Tolstoy, despite his racist notions about Indians, effectively said that the gentlest of people are to be found in India, or were to be found in India, or are to be found in some places in India as on date. Don't get me wrong, I love Delhi for a different reason. This is a land of opportunities. I don't wish to be that usual Delhi basher, and I don't wish to sound ungrateful. This city has made me what I am, and so, as someone from the Supreme Court rightly said, so much of blood has spilt in this particular soil that has charged the atmosphere of this place, that anyone who commits himself to this place and works hard is bound to succeed in Delhi. This is the city of opportunities. Whatever you call it, I will defend Delhi to death. It has its problems, but this is a great place. I haven't seen a more cosmopolitan place. Someone with my complexion can practice in Delhi without the fear of being hounded out of that particular court. I can't say how many people from the north of this country can confidently practice in southern courts. I say this bluntly, knowing the profession. So, whatever happens, I think it's a great city, and therefore the point I'm trying to make is, you have to travel this country and you will realize, because the one part is, you're not a unit, or rather you're not an isolated unit, you're never an island. There is a part of this land's culture which is a part of your genetic makeup, whether you like it or not. And that you're bound to realize when you travel this land. So just do that, and the conclusions, surely I can't impose them on you. Whatever conclusions you come to, it's for you to draw. 2, emotion according to me is a weapon. It's like a dragon. And emotion, like temper, is best used when you know exactly how to release it and strategically employ it. You will never be angry, you'll never be scared of the person who always loses his temper. You're going to be shit scared of the fellow who's always calm, and someday he says, you know what, Para sar ke upar chad chuka hai, that's the end of it, I'm taking it. Let's see where this goes. Okay. So there is a popular saying in Tamil, it crudely translates to, if a sadhu loses his temper and he loses his shirt, so to speak, he will set the forest afire. Okay, so I think emotion is what defines India significantly. For an entire month, I was in America for a vacation. I was bored to death. Colorless, soundless, what a dull place. There is nobody honking at each other. There is nobody fighting with each other. I don't understand what is going on in that place. Atrocious. You miss India. Once you get used to this place, you can't live in any other place that silence is deafening. It's louder than all the people honking on the streets of Delhi. Okay? And I think that is precisely why people from the West gravitate towards India, because they are missing that real pulse, that real vibrance. And when they come to this country, they go crazy. Array, what is this? So many people, what colors are these? What food is this? They are setting themselves afire by eating. Okay, how can you eat this? And they eat. Andhra Bhavan, please go there. Peak time, it's the Westerners eating with their hands, whereas we are asking, Bhaiya, ek chammach de do. Okay. You are asking chammach for what? Rice, and chammach for dosa also. Okay. These guys are eating saying bindas, but you'll pay $5,000 to eat with your hands at ITC Bukhara. That's a different thing. Okay. So you have to really use emotion, but most importantly, what I'm trying to say is, even if it's a journey of self-discovery, I think it will be an incomplete journey as long as you have not discovered this land. At a time like this, when the turmoil is almost reaching its charam seema, and perhaps in a few more days it will become even worse, all the more reason that you should read about this country. All the more reason that you should know what people are fighting for on both sides of the ideological spectrum. So, if you thought that you could arm yourself with degrees, use this country as a launchpad and run away from this place, this problem will visit you in the greenest of pastures in California. It will visit you everywhere, because this issue will not leave. Aapka picha ye to chhodega hi nahi. Okay? Because it's part of your genetic makeup. So, my answer to both questions is, I always consider that by default evolution produces, hopefully, more intelligent people with successive generations. That's a rebuttable presumption according to me. So, be that as it may, this generation, with the kind of resources at its disposal and clearly with the right reasons to have a chip on its shoulder because it is certainly more intelligent, must do justice to that particular intelligence by combining emotion with knowledge and a fair amount of groundedness. Just go to Nepal once after the Maoist takeover and all that and everything that has happened there. They are still so proud of their culture and their origins and their heritage that you wonder what is wrong with us, that we spew venom and spit so much on this country that it's almost as if the default mode is self-loathing, if not otherwise. Okay, so my only request is this: ignore perhaps every sage speak and every piece of wisdom that every guru has to offer. Just travel this country once whenever you have the opportunity. It will tell you oodles about what is the pulse of the civilization, the beating heart of the civilization, why has it survived for such a long time, and what is the fabric of the civilization. You may challenge me and say, please define who are part of this particular civilization. You can start an argument with me, that's a different issue. But you'll get the answers yourself once you travel the length and breadth of this country. Just do that favor to yourself. Thank you.